Hello, everyone. So today we are going to talk about the Congress of Vienna. So the last couple of class periods, we've been talking about the Napoleonic Wars and the Napoleonic Empire that has stretched across Europe. And now with Napoleon sort of on the downward slope, downward trajectory, Europe has to find a way forward. And that's what we're going to talk about today. By the time we get to 1815, Europe had really endured a lot of warfare in the past 25, 30 years. Uh, and this was mainly caused by the French Revolution and then the Napoleonic expansion that takes place across Europe and causes so many changes. Because borders in this time have changed dramatically, monarchies have fallen and risen. Um, and this is leading to a lot of different European people experiencing nationalism and causing even more changes to take place, along with the spread of these Enlightenment ideals that we've been talking about for so long. And so the continent is especially politically unstable, and leaders, especially those that are supporting monarchies and who are on the winning side after the Napoleonic Empire sort of uh, fails and is not able to sustain itself. Um, and these leaders are fearing new revolutions taking place. And so they agreed to meet and redraw the map of Europe in order to ensure peace. And this is going to take place in Vienna, Austria in 1815. So, the Congress of Vienna, a diplomatic conference that is held again, like I said, in Vienna, Austria from September of 1814 to June of 1815. And this includes leaders from five major powers: Austria, Prussia, which later becomes uh, a lot of Germany, Russia, Great Britain, and France. And these are all there to discuss post Napoleonic Empire Europe. And so the goal is to create a balance of power to prevent any one country from dominating the whole of Europe as had happened during this Napoleonic time. And it's really meant to restore traditional monarchies and to sort of keep down these revolutionary ideas that are taking place and have caused so much disruption to Europe, whether it was good or not. And so this meeting will end up shaping European politics for the next 100 years. So it becomes quite a significant meeting over time. So, in terms of the key players of this particular um, Congress, we have Prince Clemens von Metternich. He is an Austrian who was really the chief architect of the Congress, and we'll talk more about him. But he becomes a very strong, conservative, pro monarchy, traditional voice. But you also have Tsar Alexander I, who is the leader of Russia. And he wants to expand Russian influence. He wants to promote Christian unity with some of these other countries. You also have Lord Castlereagh, um, who is focused on maintaining balance and preventing another Napoleon. You have King Frederick William the Third of Prussia, and he aims to strengthen Prussia, especially in those German territories. And then finally, sorry, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand, and this is uh, a representative of France, a diplomat of France who is seeking to keep France from being punished too harshly. As he is representing the losing side, he is someone that is, you know, not necessarily someone with coming in with the greatest amount of power to this particular Congress of Vienna. So, in terms of who Metternich was, he was a prince who was also Austria's foreign minister. And as foreign minister, you are sort of in charge of, uh, compromising and, uh, you know, representing Austria in terms of when you're dealing with other countries. And so he becomes a dominant figure at the Congress. He's able to have them in his home country for the Austrian Empire, who is quite a powerful empire in Europe at the time. He is a conservative. He believes in traditional values. He believes in monarchy. He believes in religion. And he believes in social hierarchy as a key to a stable society. He is not someone who wants a lot of change, and he fears that and feels that the French Revolution has brought about too much change, specifically when it comes to the rise of people like Napoleon and all the instability that that caused. He's also fearing the rise of this nationalism that has taken place. Austria controls a lot of different lands within Europe, a lot of whom are not necessarily ethnically Austrian. And so he does not want different factions within his empire to rise up and to sort of try and break away from Austria. He also helps to form the Concert of Europe, which again, under his system, is just trying to keep the status quo going for as long as possible. He wants monarchies in control. He doesn't want nationalism. He doesn't want the rise of these democratically elected sort of nations to rise up. And so his views are going to lead to a decades-long period of this conservative dominance in Europe, where traditional values are going to continue to reign, and this is going to be known as the Age of Metternich because of everything that he represented in this Congress of Vienna. So in terms of the goals of the Congress, they really follow what the goals of Metternich were, right? He wants a restoration of the monarchies, bringing back these quote-unquote legitimate rulers that were dethroned by Napoleon, who in the minds of these people, they're trying to keep, again, these legitimate sources of power, these aristocrats continuing to control society. But you also have a balance of power where no single state, like France, could dominate Europe again. You also have the containment of France, so redrawing those borders to prevent France from expanding easily and to sort of trap France into being where they were at. And then also you're going to see the suppression of these revolutionary movements. They do not want what happened in France to continue to occur, where people that they consider to be commoners are going to rise up and try to threaten the instability of Europe. And so all of these goals sort of reflected a strong reaction to the revolutionary and Napoleonic periods that we saw when Napoleon is trying to create this domination of Europe that is taking place. Now, in terms of the political philosophy that's really guiding a lot of this, I've mentioned this a couple times in this lecture so far, and that is the idea of conservatism. The dominant ideology at this time is conservatism. It's supported by Metternich. It's supported by a lot of the other people at the table, all of whom represent this old system that is taking place where monarchies are going to continue to reign. And so they believed in monarchy, they believed in tradition, they believed in social hierarchy and order, and to keep those things in check. And by those things in check, I mean revolutionary ideals. They are rejecting Enlightenment ideals like popular sovereignty, where the people get to decide, like secularism, because having that deep connection between the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church and their monarchies are going to help keep the balance of power in check within these societies. And so these really are embodying in the Congress of Vienna a sort of conservative or traditional reaction to years of revolutionary change and upheaval that is taking place. Censorship and the repression of these liberal ideals, where you're seeing greater amounts of freedom and liberty through these revolutionary movements, are sort of being cracked down upon since Napoleon did end up losing out in these wars. So in terms of redrawing the map of Europe, the Congress of Vienna did a couple things. For one, France is reduced to its 1792 borders, but it's not harshly punished. The Netherlands and Belgium are united into the Kingdom of the Netherlands. However, this is only going to last for about 15 more years, as Belgium is going to become fully independent in 1830. And you can see Netherlands and Belgium on the map there, so in northwest Europe. Prussia is also gaining territory in the Rhineland, which is in Western Germany, or what we think of today as Western Germany. And Austria was given control of northern Italy. And these are going to come up with the German and Italian unifications that we talked about earlier in the year. Russia is also gaining most of Poland, which is in Eastern Europe. And then you also have Sweden gaining Norway. So in Scandinavia, so very much Northern Europe, Sweden is controlling both itself and Norway, and those two countries are going to split in 1905. Now, the other thing that's going to happen is that the German Confederation is replacing the Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Empire, again, was the sort of way that the empire of the Catholic Church, sort of the official representation of that. And so the German Confederation has Austria as its leader, and that is going to continue at least until the German nationalism and the German unification process takes place later in the 1800s. Now, with these restoration of monarchies, one of them was France itself. So we went through this entire revolutionary period where they are trying to take away the king, take away the monarchy. Unfortunately, during the Congress of Vienna, with the loss of the French, they now have a monarchy again. And so the Bourbon monarchy, which was the monarchy of King Louis XIV, 15th, 16th, it was the monarchy before the revolution. This is restored in France under King Louis XVIII, so the grandson of King Louis XVI. The monarchs are also restored in Spain and Portugal and Naples and Sardinia. Naples and Sardinia are in what is today Italy. And these monarchs, however, came in with a little bit more limited power than before, right? They had to listen to rules. They did not necessarily have absolute authority like a lot of the monarchs did before these revolutions took place. Now, the idea of legitimacy is extremely important in sort of guiding a lot of this process. They did not want the illegitimate, quote unquote, rulers that you're seeing that are democratically elected, that are chosen by commoners. And so, in the eyes of people like Metternich and the other conservatives at the Congress of Vienna, you are having rightful rulers being put on their thrones. And this restoration was done in order to aim for political stability by returning to the old order and to keep things in its natural balance, at least how they viewed it, in terms of how things should be run. Now, in terms of the Congress of Vienna, they also don't just want to sort of recreate what was before, but they want to re-envision what is going to happen in this post-Napoleonic world. And so the leaders aimed to create a system of alliances and collective security where people are working together in order to sort of keep things in check in order to prevent war. So they want to roll back the social and political changes that Napoleon had spread through his Napoleonic Code. And so France ends up becoming surrounded by really strong states that are part of this alliance system. Like the Netherlands, like Prussia, in order to limit that power that they hold. And as part of this was the recreation, the restoration of these monarchies, which were viewed as a natural and stabilizing institution that is going to keep people's powers in check and keep it so that they can rebuild and not necessarily lead themselves to war. And so this is going to be a world that is rooted in pre-revolutionary traditions and not Enlightenment ideas, which is causing all of these people to sort of rise up and to, go against the natural order of things, at least in terms of how these monarchs viewed it. Now, in terms of the concert of Europe, this was that series of alliances that were created by the Congress of Vienna in order to maintain that balance of power. And this is an alliance that is going to include Austria, Russia, Prussia, and then Britain, and then France is also going to join later, especially since the Bourbon monarchy is now restored in France. It is back in power. And they agreed to meet regularly in order to resolve disputes and maintain peace. This was extremely, extremely successful in preventing a major European war. This alliance system, the Concert of Europe, is able to keep Europe from engaging in a huge all-out war for the next about 100 years until World War I. And they did coordinate together in order to keep down revolutions, rebellions that in their eyes would have upset the balance of power within Europe and destabilized Europe. And they tried to suppress those revolutions, including in places like Spain and in Italy. Although, as we've talked about, this is not necessarily always going to work. Now, in terms of some of the limits and the challenges of the Congress, even though these liberal and nationalist movements that we've talked about are trying to be ignored or suppressed, there's a lot of upheaval in different places of Europe that are going to still lead to these nationalistic movements. So for instance, Germany and Italy, they do remain divided. However, that is only going to frustrate their unification efforts so far. As we talked about later in the century, these people are going to be able to rise up and finally become a united people. You also have colonized peoples and lower social classes that were excluded from the decision-making process, and that's going to lead to long-term anger and frustration over who has power within Europe. And then also Enlightenment ideals like liberty and equality, these were seen as threats by conservatives. And this is going to lead to tensions, as we talked about with some of the other effects as well, that are going to eventually erupt into future revolutions. That this, sort of tension underneath is going to build up so much that it is going to lead to a volcanic explosion of revolution. You can only keep people down for so long. Now, in terms of the Congress of Vienna, it's also doing a few things in order to rewrite the legacy of the French Revolution and Napoleon, right? They are not only trying to just redraw the map, they're also trying to change how people are thinking about the last 30 years in Europe, where you've had these Enlightenment ideals that have led to revolution. And so the leaders of Europe, like Metternich of Austria, these people are wanting to erase those radical ideas, those democratic ideas that were sparked by the French Revolution. They are portraying the revolution not just as a movement toward liberty and equality, but as this dangerous rebellion that led to the likes of people like Napoleon and had led to chaos and war and tyranny. And so, in order to do this, like we've talked about, they are reinstating those monarchies. They are also censoring revolutionary symbols and ideas. They're trying to block those from the public consciousness. And they are trying to push Enlightenment and liberal ideas back into the shadows. They're also promoting the idea, and they're trying to, sort of propagandize the fact that Napoleon was a tyrant rather than a modernizer or a reformer. And this shifts the focus away from some of the achievements that led to greater freedoms and equality under the law and made progress within Europe under the Napoleonic Code. Unfortunately, for the conservatives, these legacies couldn't be fully erased. Ideas like popular sovereignty, where the people get to decide, nationalism, legal equality, these have already spread. And these are sort of out of Pandora's box. And so this is going to fuel uprisings throughout the 19th century. Even though you can censor these ideas, people still know about them. People still believe in them. And so this is going to lead to a lot of upheaval still, even though this is designed to create that stability. The Napoleonic Code is also remaining influential across Europe. And so many of these territories end up keeping the reforms that Napoleon had introduced. And so even though they were not happy that Napoleon and the French were there, this is going to lead to, still some of those changes to stay in place. And so even though they're trying to contain the revolutionary spirit and keep it, sort of from spreading, it helped ensure that the memory and unfinished goals of both the French Revolution and Napoleon's reforms still remain powerful because people had already bought into these ideas. So, with this being said, the Congress is going to help lead to future revolutions. So even though it did create short-term stability and it did reintroduce monarchy in some places, nationalists still wanted countries like Germany and Italy to be united. And so it was only going to be so long before greater revolutions ended up striking. Liberals, who are on the other side from these monarchists, still wanted constitutional governments where the government had to follow laws and protect the rights of people, as well as civil rights for all people. Peasants and workers are still living under harsh social systems, and so this is going to lead to frustration that could lead to rebellion. And even though they are trying to suppress or keep down a lot of this change, it did not necessarily eliminate revolutionary ideals, it just postponed them, right? It just held them off from coming. And so over the next 30, 35 years, you're going to see two different periods of revolution that spike up. There's a lot of different revolutions in 1830 and then also in 1848 where they are challenging this conservative order. They're trying to move away from monarchies, and that's going to lead to a lot of change within Europe. Now, in terms of evaluating the success, well, there are a couple different successes. For one, there were no major wars in Europe for nearly a century until World War I. You also have a maintenance of a balance of power that takes place in the concert of Europe. And then you have the restored monarchies and restored order that we see as a result of the Congress of Vienna. But there's also several failures. For one, it completely ignores demands for liberal reforms and revolutionary reforms that we're going to see take place later on. It also tried to suppress rising nationalism, and so people's wants, their desires for sort of nations that represent the ethnicities of the people that live there are delayed and kept down. And they did delay these, but they did not stop revolutionary movements from taking place. And so even though they succeed in creating peace, it comes at the cost of freedom and progress for many, at least for a time. So in terms of thinking about the significance of the Congress of Vienna, it did shape 19th century Europe. It did stabilize borders and alliances. It cemented conservatism as the ruling political force for decades, where we sort of see this movement back towards monarchies and tradition and a natural order of things in the minds of those that have power already. And it inspired both reaction and resistance. Liberals and nationalists are continuing to organize, and they can't be held down but for so long. Now, the decisions made at this Congress are also going to help influence later developments, like the creation of German and Italian states, and the balance of power principle, where you're not trying to have one country dominate too much. It's going to become a lasting strategy in international diplomacy, where you don't want one country to have too much power in order to keep everyone sort of in an equal place and to go from there. All right. With that being said, the Congress of Vienna, an extremely important movement and meeting and agreement in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars. If you have any questions, please let me know, and have a good day.